Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome back to the podcast Lightworker frontman Joe Calderon. The new Lightworker record, How the Beautiful Decay, is out today on Solid State Records. Joe talks about releasing the band's debut during lockdowns, why it took so long to release their follow-up, the meaning behind How the Beautiful Decay, and then Joe dives into the meaning of a few songs on the record at my request. This was a wonderful conversation I got to have, and I'm so stoked to share it with you guys. Joe and I have been online friends for a few years, and since I left social media, we haven't spoken, so it was great to catch up. Thanks so much for listening to As the Story Grows. If this is your first episode, welcome. Thanks for checking it out. If you aren't already subscribed to the podcast feed, I love it. If you would, hit the subscribe button. We release 2 podcasts every week. And you never know when y'all discover your new favorite band, so don't miss an episode. You can find links to the Discord server, Patreon page, and mailing list in the show notes or at asthestorygrows.com. Enjoy today's conversation with Joe from Lightworker. You guys released Fury by Failure June of 2020. And I've talked to enough bands to know that releasing music during lockdown when a lot of bands weren't releasing music was not necessarily a bad thing. Do you think that was helpful as being one of the only bands to put out an album that year, that you were able to find your fan base because new music was limited?
That's a really good question. I think, to be honest with you, I think we're going to have a better view of that after this album drops.
Okay.
Because, I think, because we've noticed that a lot of, with touring and stuff now, we've definitely made a lot of new connections and listeners and that's really, really helped out in terms of spreading the word and whatnot. I mean, even for myself, there's a lot of times where I would go see bands live and recorded, I was I'm not sure if I'm digging this band, Yeah. And then you see them live and you're just like, oh, okay, that was a lot of fun. So you just kind of become a fan that way. So, I would say that, and we were also a fledgling band too, right? So that was our very first record. We didn't know what it was like to be on a label or any of that stuff or what to expect. So I think, even though we're still in the infancy of our career, we at least have our bearings now.
Yeah.
And I think we know how to promote ourselves a lot more. And we also have the experience underneath our belts of playing the songs live, and we know what works for us.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, this is a really roundabout way of answering your question.
Yeah.
But I would say I don't know.
Okay.
I would, I don't know because of those reasons.
Yeah.
What I will say though is that, and you were a part of these communities back then too, but a lot of these online groups, I mean, that was the best way that people could actually interact with each other. And I think people legitimately gave my band a shot, gave Lightworker a shot because they kind of quote unquote knew me. You know what I mean? And there's a dude that told me, he was like, yeah, the only reason why I listened to your band was because you seem like a nice guy. And I was like, sick. And there's been a few people, now that I think about it, that have said that to me, or they'll support us and because they were just kind of like, yeah, you were active and communicating with folks during a really rough time. So
Yeah, I think that's why I listened to Lightworker, right? Like, you were part of the scene and you're just like, oh, someone from our scene who we, yeah, quote unquote, know, our online friend has made it. That's dope. Let's support their band. And I mean, that's what the scene's about, right?
yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of that was what was unique about that time,
Mhm.
is that folks actually, um, it was a double-edged sword, because we couldn't tour and stuff like that, and interact with people in person. But I think some of these folks wouldn't have given us a chance unless if we were on a bigger tour where we were opening and they had to see us by default. And even then, sometimes people don't even show up until the headliners
Yeah.
go on, So like, I think some folks really went out of their way to just kind of like show support, and yeah, that was, obviously not something I think any of us want to experience again, but but at the same time, it was special to experience it
Yeah.
during such a uh, tumultuous time.
Yeah. Obviously, this is kind of a normal, you know, album comes out, you tour, cycle that you're back in. Like, are you finding it easier to just pick up tours and be on bills now? Because I know post COVID, the post lockdown, so many of the bigger bands took up so much oxygen in the room that it created a vacuum where little bands couldn't tour and have shows.
Hmm. Yeah, I think what ended up happening then was, I don't disagree, and I understand why that ended up happening. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of us smaller bands ended up kind of gathering together, and we're just like, hey, we're just gonna go out and play these shows and finally meet each other in person, like us and Fall Star and The Undertaking. We did a couple of runs together,
Yeah.
us and Spirit Breaker, and just a handful of other bands, And I think it gave, in a weird way, I think it actually kind of nurtured the smaller side of the scene.
Hmm.
Because you started to see in all facets of heavy music, these like smaller shows that were happening, and I see a ton of smaller bands now that are playing shows that are packed now, and it's like, hey, they're playing 500 cap rooms and they're sold out,
Yeah.
and they're not necessarily signed or this or that. They just have the right mentality and the work ethic to get it done, and get out there and like meet people, and they have great music. And so I almost feel like uh the COVID era kind of birthed I think it killed a lot of bands, obviously, but I
Yeah.
think it also did give birth to the next generation of heavy music. And I think we have been lucky enough to be like a pre-pandemic band, but also have survived that and keep going, and like these shows that we've been doing, people have been coming out, and it's been great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Fury of Failure comes out 2020. We're here in 2024 talking about this new record. Why the time in between releases? Was it just
oh yeah, why the time between releases? So um to be honest with you, I think not I think I know, it was one of those things where, Grayson and I, the guitarist in the band, we both, you know write the songs musically, and then obviously I put my vocal ideas and stuff over it, um, and I think there was kind of a bit of a dichotomy, because during lockdown and beyond that, like the last 3.5 years, I did gain a lot of creative energy, because I was just kind of, just witnessing what was going on in the world and whatnot. And, there's definitely a sense of urgency and anger. Uh, but with Grayson, he's naturally an extroverted guy.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely an ambivert. So, I'm one of those folks who's like, I like to be around people, but I also need to recharge,
Yeah.
you know? And but Grayson like thrives off of being around people. So um you know being at home, he was not around. At first he liked it. He was like, oh, like, I get to actually relax for once. And I think a lot of people felt that way for the
Yeah.
first, like, 2 to 4 weeks, and then after that it began to like wear on them, and
Mhm.
it really took a toll on him. And the only reason why I feel comfortable mentioning this is because we actually have like a mini documentary, like a 6-part mini documentary that's coming out, and he talks about it.
Yeah.
And he basically, yeah, I mean, he just was just like, dude, I have no ideas because I haven't been out experiencing life, you know. And I that definitely delayed some of the writing sessions and stuff. You know, and it ended up landing on me to kind of like come up with some ideas to. And I'm more of a parts guy. Like I'll write, like a verse, or what I think is a verse and a chorus, or like a chorus and then a bridge or something like that. And then he usually swoops in and finishes the idea out, and then he usually writes like 80% of the song.
Yeah.
So I contribute, that 20-25% musically. Um, and but because, he just had no ideas in the creative tank, so to speak, I had to go in there and just start writing stuff, and all my ideas ended up making it on the record because of that, which is awesome. But I'm all, at the same time, I was just like, dude, I just felt so bad for him because I could
Yeah.
tell he was getting down on himself about it. And then it all it did was like dig a deeper hole. But with one of our two new singles, called Burn Scar, we went away on a writing retreat, and then I had that, like, some of the riff ideas, and it started to pour out of him again. I don't know what happened, but we hit the riff faucet, and and then he was able to turn that on high, and then, like, riffs just started pouring out. So
Yeah.
um but that's, I mean, like, we always wanted to write, and we had a great idea of where we wanted to go. Oh, and that was the other thing too. I don't think Grayson or I or even Ryan could put into words how hard and difficult writing this record was for
Mhm.
us. Um, and it's kind of crazy because we never got on each other's nerves. We didn't fight with each other or anything like that. It had nothing to do with that, but we all internally went through some bullshit,
Mhm.
um, maybe more than once, that just really mentally and emotionally beat the shit out of us.
Yeah.
And we knew what we wanted to do musically. And I think that was another thing that also kind of like beat me up, I know, and I think Grayson to a certain degree too, was we knew we wanted to get heavier. We knew that we wanted to be more aggressive. Um, but I think what we were trying to do was foreign to us to a certain
Mhm.
extent. We're used to, especially if you listen to Fury by Failure. I think it's a kind of a brighter sounding record. Um, I mean, yeah, it's still metal and stuff, but there's like a lot of hope in it.
Yeah.
and and Grayson, if you meet the guy, I mean, he's just, I mean, he's the flower child. He's always, or like, August Burns Red has that shirt that says "Angry Music for Happy People."
Right. Yeah.
That's Grayson to a T, and so for him to kind of like, I guess he didn't know how to channel that negativity and to kind of recycle it and turn it into something that's so volatile. And whereas like that's kind of my bread and butter, at least when it comes to lyrics and stuff.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so all that to say, like, the reason why it took so long was because we were kind of battling our mental and emotional demons, and we were also getting a grasp of how to keep our identities, but also become a more aggressive band in the meantime. And I hope and I think, and based off of the reactions that we've been getting off of the two new singles, I think we've achieved that. So I think we're both able to kind of breathe a little bit more easily, and now we're just like, okay, we're able to do that now. So like, and the reception has been strong. So like, hell yeah, let's keep doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in COVID and coming out of like lockdowns, it's a collective traumatic experience, and there's an insurrection and George Floyd protest, and like on top of just like a lot of people went through a lot of hard stuff being in lockdown, and that anybody came out with just like I guess people put all that energy into creativity, but for so many people it was like crippling, just like, what do you do now? So
Exactly.
yeah, it makes sense. Did you guys know you wanted to get heavier before, I guess, after Fury by Failure came out, or was it just the process of being on the road and playing songs live where you're like, we could be heavier, do something more?
I would say it was a combination of both. So initially, the with Fury by Failure, Grayson was kind of fresh out of being in another band, and he didn't really have the opportunity to write. And so I actually told him, I was like, I want our debut to be like just pissed. And he was like, dude, I hear you, but give me a record to kind of like just purge all these other ideas that I have, and they'll still be on the heavier side. But on record number 2, we'll get heavier, And I was like, all right, I'm gonna hold you to that because I'm pissed. I'm pissed right now.
Yeah.
so
I'm always angry.
Exactly. We knew that, and I think kind of what fueled at least my fire to get heavier was when we played live. The heavier songs just had great reception.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things where the energy came, like, was just electric when we would play songs like Empire or Words Dissolve or Remove the Earth, which Remove the Earth, I guess, is kind of it's a deep cut off of our first record, but it ended up being a favorite because it, was pummeling. And I think the combination of me knowing I wanted to get heavier and my tastes also getting heavier as I get older, which is usually the other way around,
Right.
But yeah, we just kind of knew that that's the direction that we wanted to head in. And not only that, like, just recognizing that I think heavy music is evolving too. And it always has been evolving. Like, back when Black Sabbath came out, that was the heaviest shit in the world.
Right.
And now it's considered probably just rock. If that they were to come out now, like, people would just be like, oh, that's just a rock band. Not even hard rock. It would just be a rock band.
Yeah.
And so, like, looking back on the Fury stuff, I'm like, hey, this is like, I think we didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of the stuff off of that record, not all of it, but some of it definitely was like touching on just hard rock. And I was just like, nah, dude, we're a metal band, you know? And that's what I want to do. And like, it's kind of funny because you look back on, some Killswitch Engage stuff and you're just kind of like, wow, like, you listen to, I guess, what's considered quote unquote metalcore now compared to Killswitch. It's like Killswitch seems a bit lighter, but back then it was pretty volatile, like I would say that the End of Heartache and As Daylight Dies, I mean, they definitely had their heavy moments, but I mean, it's generally softer than what you kind of get today in
Yeah.
metalcore. Um, the Killswitch record being the exception is Alive or Just Breathing, because that one still is absolutely crushing. I don't know if you're familiar with that one,
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, I think that too is like, so it was also a personal evolution for us too, recognizing like, hey, like we've also got more aggression in the tank, so to speak.
New album's called How the Beautiful Decay. Where'd that title come from?
That title came from a couple of different places. When we were discussing what we wanted to do with this record and whatnot, and kind of, I guess, like the themes of what I would be talking about lyrically, I think, it all is hand in hand, within the last 3.5, 4 years of like recognizing that life as we knew it was kind of like decaying before us. A lot of friendships that we have as human beings are dependent on seeing each other regularly, or even like going to work every day and having those relationships with your coworkers and whatnot. It's very dependent on working together, but like suddenly, after 3 or 4 weeks, you start hearing less and less from particular people.
Yeah.
And I remember when my dog and I went for a walk one day. I think this was like probably in early 2022, and things were opening. They like pretty much opened up, but there was still that lingering sting, I guess, of what everybody had gone through. Um, I just realized that, hey, my dog at the beginning of the pandemic was 3, and now he's 6. It's or about to be 6 years old, if I'm doing my math correctly. That's not my strong suit, but but and I could notice him getting older, and I also noticed that I was getting older, and even though and there was aspects of life that didn't stop, like aging or more intimate relationships, like Grayson got engaged and whatnot, and it got to me because it was just kind of like, wow, we've got one life to live, and a lot of things were kind of, I guess a lot of people thought things were put on hold, but in a lot of ways they weren't. The world kept spinning, and so a lot of these beautiful things that we have in our lives just kind of began to decay, and morph into other things. But I don't think, like at the same time, even when beautiful things do decay, it's not necessarily a negative thing. When our bodies, when we die, like um, it's the end of our natural life cycle, and I thought a lot about death. I mean, obviously, that was just. I mean, I think that was on everybody's mind. The last 3.5 years or so, and um, I just, I think I kind of became obsessed with like what am I going to leave behind,
Yeah.
and I'm personally, don't hold me to this, but I personally don't foresee myself having any kids. So like, to me, I'm just like, well, I mean, like, I think the traditional sense is like, hey, well, leaving your legacy is by having a family and, having kids and whatnot. But I kind of became obsessed of like, well, what am I going to leave behind? And I realized that how I treat people and is, especially at my worst, is what really is going to leave behind those ripples, you know?
Hmm.
And that really tied into the theme of the record. Um, uh, because of the beautiful part of it, and obviously throughout the last 3.5 years, a lot of relationships have also decayed because of differing views and whatnot. Um, so like I said, it's kind of coming from a few different angles, and Grayson was just like, yeah, he was just kept thinking about the word decay, and there was, to add to, I guess, the story behind it. Back when we were kids, we played in a band, and one of our buddies' bands was called How the Beautiful Decay, and we were just like, dude, like if we get permission from him, like we should maybe name the album this, because we were both very stoked about it. And our buddy was like, yeah, dude, I mean, like, that was our high school band, like, go ahead. And then I also found out that like they got it from a Darkest Hour song, like an OG Darkest
Yeah.
Hour
Yeah.
song. And I'm a very big fan of Darkest Hour, but mainly like kind of their, I guess, what would be considered their mid-career stuff. So like Undoing Ruin and Moving Forward. And this was pre that, so I wasn't familiar with that. But I was like, that's kind of poetic almost, how like a band that has a very big influence on me is also like, you know, we're kind of almost naming this our album after one of their songs indirectly,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, all those factors, is what made us decide to call it How the Beautiful Decay.
Nice. How does the artwork play into that? Because the artwork, it's like a rebirth in the artwork.
Hmm. so, so, yeah, it is. And that's kind of, we wanted to have the same theme, or at least some similar themes as like the last record, from that the great Ryan Clark did,
Yeah.
you know, and but it being a darker, and I know every band is always like, oh, our next record is darker, or our new record is darker, and blah blah blah. But um, we
This
were,
actually is.
yeah, this one actually is. I mean, like lyrically, like First Light is about me dealing with like very strong suicidal thoughts, me wanting to kill myself. And I don't think I could have talked about that kind of stuff on the first record, but I digress. But artwork wise, we wanted to keep the butterfly theme, and, or at least like the animal theme. And we realized that like, hey, um, we, uh, just, man, I think that now that I think about it, a lot of what, like just kind of retracing my steps a little bit, like How the Beautiful Decay, just taking the time to also recognize the smaller things in life
Mhm.
and how beautiful that can be
Yeah.
is also a huge theme, I think, um, especially on the final track. And with we just kind of, remembered that, like, hey, butterflies, what ends up happening, I mean, they come from caterpillars, and what ends up happening is, they obviously build a cocoon, but inside that cocoon, they literally melt into just liquid or something.
Yeah.
and and then they kind of come out emerging, and they're, this completely different creature. And I think that's kind of, you know, they kind of destroy their own, like, little house, their cocoon, in order to come out and like, live the next phase in their lives. And I think a lot of people have kind of gone through that the last few years, and
Yeah.
and um and I think it correlates with the artwork, because sometimes, butterflies also, during that time of transformation, sometimes they don't emerge from the cocoon. Sometimes, they emerge, but their wings are completely crippled. And if you notice on the artwork, there's, kind of like a small,
Butterfly graveyard.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I didn't know the right way to put it, but I think that you put it perfectly. And it's, and the ones that, obviously the ones that emerge, obviously have that teal that kind of continues from the first record.
Yeah.
And kind of like, I guess, kind of giving a little nod to, I guess, the light part of our Lightworker name, and also continuing that theme. And it's kind of a bummer to, obviously, I mean, it's kind of a bummer to see that, like, hey, the caterpillar form has to completely destroy itself in order to come
Yeah.
out, but, it turns into this beautiful thing. And so, like I said, decaying isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's, everything has its time and place. And I think that that's what we were trying to capture. And Bailey, Zindel, she did a phenomenal job of just, I think, expressing that and understanding what we were trying to go for. And so we're very pumped on this new album cover.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very cool. I'm a big fan. I want to ask, I mean, there's a lot of great songs on this record. I want to ask about the lyrics to two songs in particular, A Bastard Shame and Burn Scar.
Okay. Yeah. So you've heard the whole record?
Yes.
Oh, dude.
I have.
Oh, shit. Okay. That's sick. I did not know that.
Yeah.
So, well, which one do you want to dive into first?
Let's do Burn Scar because it's the most recent single.
Sure. So, lyrically, this is definitely where the pissed side of me came out. As you and I have, obviously we've, been online homies,
Yeah.
for a few years now, and we've kind of vented our own frustrations about the last few years. But I think it just really it really just bothered me, just like seeing how people were treating each other, regardless of what your political or religious beliefs are. It just really bothered me that people just kind of, there was like such a big divide,
Mhm.
And I definitely experienced that, like folks that I considered really close, like, differing views really got in the way of that. And luckily, a lot of that has been kind of amended and whatnot, but it's still not the same,
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Burn Scar is about. But to to quit beating around the bush, um, it's about religious hypocrisy. It's about, I still, even though we're not a Christian band, because the other guys in the band are not Christian, and what I talk about is not necessarily, like Christian stuff, but I still do identify as a Christian, but I just hated seeing other people that claimed the faith just not giving a single fuck about how other people felt during the last 3 years
Yeah.
about pretty much anything. It's just like they had no problem with, when it came to, stepping on other people's views and whatnot. And it's just kind of like, that's fine. But the moment that even something was remotely even questioned, it was such it was a very vengeful response.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, dude, I mean, like, do you know Jesus? Like, this is not cool. Like, maybe I am a bit of a hippie Christian, or maybe I might, I would go as far as maybe some folks that consider themselves Christians probably don't consider me a Christian, and so be it. Like,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, to me, it's like, it's kind of crazy. Like, when we released Fury by Failure, obviously being on Solid State comes with the territory of,
It
being
brings some baggage.
exactly, like people automatically assume that you're a Christian band and whatnot. And um, I had quite a few people actually hit me up, and I had some people say, like, well, you need to get rid of the other members of your band then. Like, and I was just like, you know nothing about me. Like, and you don't know what these guys have added to my life, and how, like, if we wanted to break it down, how Christ-like they actually have been towards me, as opposed to, like, some of the folks that I have met. Like, so it's one of those things where it's just like, dude, you guys are speaking out of turn, and that's not to say that every Christian's that way, but I mean, even when we released the song, it was kind of crazy because people zoomed into one lyric, and I'm wondering if you kind of know which one it is, but
yes.
yeah, and that's probably why you asked.
Yes.
Yes, and that's hypocrisy in the shape of a cross.
Yeah.
And I mean, we even got some comments. I saw some comments on our YouTube where, they were like, "Oh, are you trying to be an edgelord or something like that?" I'm like, and I just kind of laugh because I'm like, dude, you zoomed into one stanza of the entire song, and, like, you're not, you're just not looking at it from a bigger lens, and and better to hear it from somebody that's a Christian than, I guess, like, somebody else who doesn't understand where you're coming from. So
Yeah.
I kind of view that as almost my responsibility. And I always loved it growing up. And I would say now it's definitely my favorite parable is the parable of the Good Samaritan that Jesus talked about, because I feel so passionate about that now. Like, to hell with politics, to hell with, like, whatever you think is normal or not. Like, people are human beings and they should be treated as such. No, I mean, they're period.
Yeah.
So that's what Burns Car's about.
Yep.
And then a bastard shame. So I think something that I'm always going to wrestle with and deal with the rest of my life. And I've been to therapy and stuff like that, but, it's just a part of me is wrestling with the fact that I grew up without a father figure.
Mm-hmm.
And that song, I've kind of touched on that on other songs, and like I said, I think I always will have at least a song about that on each record that we do, or because it's left such a big impact on who I am, you know?
Yep.
And I think during the height of, the last few years, I think that really became glaringly obvious to me that I felt like kind of directionless, especially when kind of like touching on the burn scar stuff where, this community, these, like of the church and stuff like that, feeling like, like, hey, I felt like, largely we're kind of like all on the same page, and then realizing that we weren't, I felt very directionless, and recognizing that, a lot of my insecurities were also coming to the forefront, because during lockdown and whatnot, I lived by myself. I didn't even have my dog with me. He was staying with my mom. And so, even though I was working remotely and whatnot, I mean, that's still a long time to be spending by yourself. Yeah. And so I had a lot of time to think and process a lot of the fatherless things that I felt, I kind of don't know what the right word is there, but
yeah.
And it's definitely something I struggle with. I think I spent a lot of that time also just trying to find the truth in the fact that, like, hey, I am loved by my friends and family and my dog, most importantly, above all, right? So, but I really try to be as glaringly honest as I could be about that. And there's some other songs on the record that I don't think I'm even ready to talk about. Like, yeah. and like, that's how honest I was. Yeah, so Bastard Shame is just basically about, growing up fatherless. And, I had a stepdad, but he was mentally not there. All he did was beat the shit out of me and verbally and emotionally abuse me and the rest of my family. So that, I mean, like, to me, that's definitely that's not a father figure at all, Yeah. So, that's, and, just realizing that's where a lot of my insecurities stem from when it comes to, I guess just not just being just like a dude, but just being a human being. So.
Comes out April 19th. You guys have a short run here in March. You got a short run in May. Is that your goal, to just try to be on the road as much as possible this year?
Hell yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, and there's more unannounced stuff in the works, like where this train ain't slowing down, baby. We're definitely taking advantage of the fact that, like, we're actually getting a normal record cycle.
Right. It's a little bit better to just like have a record and play shows and like meet people and not be like, here's our record and hope you stream it while we're in our living room.
Yeah, exactly. Just know that you can come up to us and talk to us. And if you want to talk lyrics and, especially about the subjects that like burn scar broaches, I'm an open book. Find my way back to you.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our intro music was written and composed by Jeremy Hunt. The As the Story Grows theme is by Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can join us at patreon.com/asthestorygrows. Be a part of our community and join the ongoing conversation over on Discord. If you enjoy this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.